What if your retirement account is about to become the exit strategy for some of the richest investors on earth? Not because you chose to invest, not because your advisor recommended it, but because the rules were changed to make sure billions of retirement dollars show up exactly when they're needed most. And if critics are right, this could become one of the largest transfers of valuation risk from Wall Street insiders to Main Street retirees we've seen in years. Today I'm going to show you why SpaceX, OpenAI, and the AI boom may affect your retirement account whether you want them to or not, and why retirees need to understand what's happening before the biggest IPO wave in history arrives. Let's start with a simple question. How many of you own SpaceX? Most people would say, I don't. And technically that is true. SpaceX is still private. You can't buy shares in your brokerage account, but that could soon change. And when it does, millions of Americans may become SpaceX investors without ever making a conscious decision to buy it. That's where this story gets really interesting. Now, before we go any further, this is not an anti-SpaceX video. SpaceX is one of the most impressive companies ever built. Starlink is remarkable. The rocket business has transformed an industry. The technology is real. The innovation is real. The question isn't whether SpaceX is a great company. The question is whether retirement investors are being invited into the party at exactly the moment early investors are headed for the exit. Those are two very different questions. Because let's be honest, the billionaires, the venture capital firms, the private equity investors, the insiders who got into these companies years ago didn't invest because they wanted to hold these shares for forever. Eventually, they need liquidity. Eventually, they need buyers. Eventually, they need an exit. That's how investing works. Nothing unusual about that. But here's where retirees should pay attention. Who exactly will be buying from them? Most Americans do not invest by picking individual stocks. They invest through 401ks, IRAs, mutual funds, target date funds, and index funds. In fact, index funds have been one of the greatest wealth building tools ever created. They're simple, low cost, diversified, and they've helped millions of Americans retire with dignity. But they have one characteristic most investors never think about. They don't make decisions, they follow rules. And when the rules change, your money follows. And if you think that's a small issue, consider who's talking about the future of investing. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, oversees trillions of dollars in assets and has repeatedly discussed the growing importance of private markets and expanding investor access to them. Supporters see that as a positive development. They argue ordinary investors deserve access to opportunities that were once reserved only for institutions and the ultra-wealthy. But critics see another side. They point out that by the time many companies finally reach public markets, years of explosive growth may have already benefited private investors. In other words, the biggest gains may happen before retirement investors ever get a seat at the table. Wall Street calls it democratizing access. Critics call it democratizing the risk. And that is why this upcoming IPO wave matters, because it raises a simple question. When these companies finally go public, are retirees getting access to an opportunity, or are they providing liquidity for investors who got there years earlier? That's what caught my attention. Not Elon Musk, not rockets, not even AI, the rule change. Because recently Nasdaq approved changes that allow certain massive companies to enter major indexes much faster than before. Supporters say it's simply modernization. Critics argue it's something else entirely. They argue the changes create a perfect setup. Early investors get liquidity. Retirement investors inherit the valuation risk. Why? Because once a stock enters a major index, funds tracking that index are required to buy it. Not because it's cheap, not because it's attractive, not because it's a bargain, because the rules require it. Billions of dollars can flow automatically. with no vote, no valuation committee, no discussion, just automatic buying. And when billions of dollars are forced to buy something regardless of price, it's worth paying attention. Now let's talk about SpaceX for a moment. Reports suggest that the company could pursue a valuation approaching $1.75 trillion. Think about that, 1.75 trillion. That would make it one of the largest companies on Earth almost overnight, and the largest IPO in history. Maybe it's worth that, maybe it isn't. Reasonable people can disagree. But here's something that's hard to argue with. When expectations reach extreme levels, the margin for error gets very small. And history has a habit of teaching this lesson over and over again. Railroads changed America. Investors who bought at the wrong price got crushed. The internet changed the world, but many investors still lost fortunes. Fiber optic networks became the backbone of modern life, but many of the companies behind them went bankrupt. The technology won, the early investors often didn't. And that's the distinction retirees can't afford to forget, because retirees don't get paid for being right about technology. They get paid for owning a profitable company. A company can be revolutionary and still be overpriced though. A company can change civilization and still disappoint investors. History is filled with examples. Now here's where the story gets even bigger. SpaceX may only be the beginning. OpenAI, Anthropic, and other AI companies are expected to follow. Together, they represent the most powerful investment narrative on the planet right now, artificial intelligence. Every CEO is talking about it. Early earnings calls mention it. Every investor wants exposure to it. And whenever everyone wants the same thing at the same time, that's usually when smart investors slow down and start asking questions. Will AI change the world? Probably. Will SpaceX continue doing extraordinary things? Probably. Will these companies create tremendous value? Possibly. But that's not the question retirees should be asking. The real question is this: who benefits most from these valuations? The investors buying today or the investors selling? Because those are not the same thing. Larry Fink often talks about expanding access to investment opportunities. The question retirees need to ask is whether these IPOs represent access to opportunity or access to someone else's exit, because those are very different things. And that's the concern some analysts have. Not that these companies are bad, not that the technology isn't real, but that retirement savers may become the buyers of last resort. Retirement savers may end up buying these companies after years of growth has made the early investors very wealthy. The risk may be going public just as the reward is going private. Now let me be clear, I'm not saying SpaceX is a bubble. I'm not saying OpenAI is a bubble. And I'm certainly not telling you to panic. Panic is expensive. Preparation is profitable. The goal isn't predicting the future, the goal is understanding the risks before they arrive. So what should you do? First, know what you own. Look inside your 401k, look inside your IRA. Understand what's actually inside those funds. Most people never do. Second, understand concentration risk. Many retirement portfolios already have enormous exposure to large technology companies. Far more than most investors realize. The larger these companies become, the larger their influence on retirement outcomes. Third, ask yourself one simple question. If this company were not famous, if it weren't associated with AI, if it weren't associated with Elon Musk, would I still be excited about buying it at this valuation? That is a surprisingly powerful filter. And finally, remember that retirement success isn't built on chasing the next big thing. It's built on managing risk, protecting capital, generating income, and building a plan that can survive uncertainty. Here's my biggest takeaway. SpaceX may become one of the greatest companies ever built. OpenAI may transform civilization. AI may create extraordinary wealth. All of that can be true, and retirement investors can still overpay. Because investing isn't just about finding great companies. It's about finding great companies at reasonable prices. And sometimes the biggest opportunities for insiders become the biggest risks for everyone arriving late. That's why retirees should pay attention. Not because the future is scary, but because understanding incentives is one of the most powerful forms of risk management. If you'd like a second opinion on your retirement strategy, or you'd like us to review how much exposure your portfolio has to large technology companies and AI-related investments, schedule a free 15-minute consultation using the link below. We'll see you in the next video.